Tony, do you know guys who've gone through the interview process for head coaching jobs? Like, have you talked to them about the actual process?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
I mean, I'm just curious, like, so they do Zoom, right? So you pop them up on Zoom and then
Well, it's right now that's what you can do with the guys who are
by the
coaching.
rules. Yes. And there'll be another round if they're, or whatever. And
yeah, you try to do another round because you want to do it in person if possible.
Yeah, and I like the transparency. I'm just curious, like is it Shad and Trent together? Do you get one-on-one time with both guys? I mean, is it an hour long? Is it 4 hours long? I mean, how much do you talk about? Like, what question would you ask me, Tony, if you were interviewing me for a head coaching job?
Well, a couple of things. One, I don't want to get into specifics, outside of what the Jaguars have, said publicly at this point.
Okay.
Of who's in there and who's not. The time frame of these interviews a lot of it depends on the candidate, the connection, what you're trying, is it the first, is the second, what are you focused on? I think it depends on the individual. To me, you have to do your background on each individual to make sure you have your standard questions across, the board you want to ask everybody. But then you get into more specifics. Like if you look at two guys who interviewed on Saturday, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, there's going to be similar questions about leadership, philosophy, culture, what's your core values, what are your non-negotiables, stuff like that, which is really important. Communication, leadership style, because you're trying to project a guy like Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, these two guys, just naming two, that have never done the job you're actually hiring them to do. Because being an offensive coordinator or defense coordinator is widely different than being the head coach. At the same time, a guy like Ben Johnson, he's a great coordinator.
Right.
You know what he has done. So you don't spend a ton of time on like offensive philosophy, but you want to understand what's your plan for Trevor. But more importantly, because he has stated he wants to call plays as a head coach. Great. How do you manage your week? How do you build your game plan as an offensive coordinator, but still, fulfill your role and your obligations as a head coach, because it adds to your plate quite a bit, so it's about time management, leadership, what are you going to delegate? Who's your staff? So what's your defensive philosophy to match what you're going to do offensively? What are your top three defense coordinators you're going to go after? All these guys have had these conversations with coaches around the league, say, hey, will you come with me? But at the same time, you can't guarantee a guy's going to come, because they might be under contract. You might get blocked. I mean, there's a lot of things there.
Okay.
Or a guy like Aaron Glenn, you want to focus on, what is your – because he's a defensive guy, bona fide leader, great job. Same questions as Ben around culture, being a head coach, blah, blah, blah. But then you really want to dig into, hey, Aaron, you're a defensive guy. Tell me your plan for Trevor Lawrence. We've invested $55 billion a year in this guy.
Right.
What do you think? What's your plan? Who's your offensive coordinator? What kind of, philosophy you're going to have on the offense? What's your interaction as a defensive guy? How are you going to manage that relationship with your quarterback? So it's different because Aaron's never had to deal with the offensive side of the ball. He's been a D coordinator. But when you have a franchise quarterback, or even if you don't, that head coach better have a great relationship with your quarterback. So really your questions and how you dig into it and where you focus is going to be depending on the candidate.
Tony, have we underestimated the challenge of dueling Tom Brady when it comes to courting coaches or players or whatever it might be? And I don't mean we, like the Jaguars in particular, but if you looked at the head coaching openings right now and you honestly took a look at them, the Raiders might be the least appealing.
Sure.
As to what they have.
I think it's the second to worst job.
Okay, but yet I feel there's a part of me that feels like that's where Ben Johnson is going to end up.
He didn't get Vrabel, his buddy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
but he was always going New England. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a Brady fail, and maybe I just the fact that there seems to be a narrative emerging from their talk that there's something there. And we didn't get that here.
But Jeff, where's that narrative coming from?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I don't know. I'm just curious. You tell me. You're the two Hall of Famers, you and Brady.
Ooh.
Is he in yet?
Wow.
Brady? Has it been 5?
No, he's not.
No.
He is not in yet.
Tony's the Hall of Famer.
yeah.
So there's
Tony's
only one
not.
Hall of Famer,
Yeah.
Jeff. Let's not get confused.
fair.
But I think
Fair.
it's safe to say that Tom Brady will get in. I think that's.
I
safe
think
to
so.
say.
You're throwing out there.
Yeah, I think so.
Should be first ballot, I bet.
I think he might. That might be one of the shortest presentations ever.
There's the word unanimous.
Tom Brady.
comes to
Give me
mind.
his reputation. Tony, you're that same. You've done the broadcasting thing. You're in those
Yeah.
circles. What is the impression? Is he for real? I mean, he
Yeah,
was so committed as a player, right? I mean,
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see what Tom Brady does after this season. How much involvement does he really want to have in the day-to-day? Because the more he has, then he might not be able to do Fox any longer.
he's kind of said that, hadn't he?
I
He's
feel-
hinted at
well,
that.
he hasn't, but most people expect him just to go do
Yeah.
Raiders
He
stuff.
hasn't been great on Fox. He's solid, but it's not been like some must-watch
No
appointment.
revelation,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
So I think Tom Brady is Tom Brady. I mean, greatest quarterback all time, most Super Bowl wins, and a great leader, smart, all those things. So he's going to be an allure for coaches, especially you think about young coaches who kind of grew up watching Tom Brady.
Yeah.
So you wonder how much influence does that have? However, I do think you got to remember each of these guys also have agents. I think these guys look at history, what has happened, how many chances are you going to get to be a head coach? And if you look at the Raiders organization, they are in the AFC West. They're by far the fourth best team in a tough division with good quarterbacks. You have Mahomes, you have Herbert with Harbaugh, you have Nix with Peyton.
Yeah.
Obviously Mahomes and Randy Reid. So you're fourth. You don't have a quarterback. Now the new ownership group, I think you'll have more cash to spend on free agents, because the question always was, how much cash can Mark Davis invest in bonuses and guarantees with these free agents? So that should help. So I think it's gonna. I don't think that is the job that if you're Ben Johnson and you can go anywhere you want, would you choose? Would you choose the Raiders just because it's Tom Brady? Because let me tell you about Tom Brady.
No, the vision, though. I think it's what Brady's selling of success, his version of success and how to get there. I think that's what they're selling.
Okay, but Jeff, here you and I both know this.
Uh-huh.
In the NFL, after the courting and after you sign, you get married, you say I do's, and the honeymoon's over.
Yeah.
It's in the NFL, divorces happen pretty quick.
Sure.
People get sideways.
Well, that could happen here too. I mean, here you're
anywhere.
Yeah.
But where do you have the better chance? If you were taking a step back and an honest look, where do you have a better chance to win over the next 24 months? The Jaguars or the Raiders?
Hey, Tone,
It's not even close in my opinion. The Jaguars, this job is 10x better than the Raiders job.
Yeah, except for the Jaguars.
Don't
That's the
you
problem.
think, Tone, that and Shad Khan has been a patient guy with his coaches. Don't you think that this coach is going to get a little more leeway because of all that is going to be going on with this franchise over the next 3 years, with the stadium being displaced?
Like if you ask me the one negative about this job that you have to consider is that it's going to be
different challenges.
There's going to be distractions that are non-football related.
Right.
You're going to have a stadium construction going on. You're going to play in a partially partial capacity stadium for a year. You're going to have to play somewhere else for a year.
Yeah.
All those are real things and concerns, and those are part of the questions you talk to these kids
But might buy you more time as a head coach. Well, listen, I mean, you got me. I'm going to steer us through these bubbling waters and do just fine, and then then watch.
Hopefully, then you don't have a coach that's his mentality.
Well, I know, but
I don't think a guy coming in is that mentality taking over this team, and I don't think that's Shad Khan's mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Shad has been patient. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I go back and I get heat for this. I think Shad Khan is one of the better owners. If you look at the overall picture, now obviously the final judgment is wins and losses,
right?
And the organization has to do better. But if you look at the owner's job, investing, giving resources, commitment to city, all those things, Shad is an A+.
I think Hicken's
you want
point
to be critical. You want to be critical. The hiring and the results. Okay, great. And right now, that's all the fans care about.
Right.
And I think Shad is that. I think he's always been like this. This is a competitive guy. I mean, you don't do what he's done in the business world without having some real, competitive fire. I don't think the fans always see that. And so while I think Shad will always be patient because that's his personality, I do think there's an expectation like, hey, wait a second. I made a change because I felt we were better than the performance we got and the outcome we got, the results we got. Like, we expect to, like, turn this around and let's get going. I don't care if we're playing, where we're playing.
I think Hink's point carries weight from this standpoint, though. Sure, that's not going to be publicly, like, thrown out there. Oh, you got to pass if you're no get out the gates. And I don't think he's saying that, but we will think that way. Fans will. It will. If it doesn't go well, that will be one of the things that's considered.
I disagree. I don't think fans are.
Not by shot, but okay. Well, maybe.
No, I think our fan base is like, I don't care anymore. I don't care where we play. We'll go play in the park. Like, we need to have an organization, and you better have a leader that can do this over the next 2 to 3 years.
Gus used to say that too, Tom.
I don't care where we play. Like, we'll play in the parking lot. Let's go. Like, you have to have that mentality. You have to have some grit, some toughness.
Solid.
And I think that needs to be built into the organization because you're going to go through. It's not going to be perfect. It's never perfect. But I get really tired of the excuses. Oh, we played in London. Okay, great. Don't care. Oh, we got this road trip. Oh, it's going to be stadium construction. Great. You know what the good teams do? They win wherever they play.
Yeah.
Maybe
one day we'll have one of those.
Last thing before we go, and you're big on identity. I know that we've talked about this a few times. Identity. What is the identity? We didn't have I get that. Another word that pops up is culture, and I said this earlier, and I wonder if you concur or disagree. The Jacksonville Jaguars are one of the few teams I know who had a terrible culture and were a quarter away from a Super Bowl, and had a good culture allegedly this year, and we're 4-13. Give me a great guy who understands offense, and we won't go 4-13 because we always say, "Well, what kind of coach do you want?" You know what I'm saying? There have been what teams do you know have a bad culture and win, and have a good culture and lose? I don't get it. I give up on the culture.
I would disagree in 17 we had a bad culture. I disagree with that. I think the culture got bad in 18 because of how it was
I think those were a lot of bad dudes who were out for themselves. And go ahead.
Well, maybe, but it flourished in 18 where everyone was talking about getting paid, blah, blah, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In 17,
and they had adversity. Group. Listen, culture doesn't show up when you're winning. Everyone's happy.
That's right.
You're the king of the court. That ego is fed, and you're fine. It's when it gets questioned that it
doesn't
wrong.
get built. Let me just say this: it doesn't get built overnight, and you have to test the durability of whatever culture you're building. And obviously, the durability of that 2017 team, as far as the locker room, was not very strong. And we can play Monday morning quarterback and argue why, but it just wasn't. The results
and Dan and I had.
And by the way, and I think you got to be careful from the outside, me included, and you guys and all of us, that aren't in the locker room. Do we know what the culture was like in that building?
It's a 4-win culture. That's what my point is. Good, bad, or indifferent. If that culture is good and happy,
you sat there, Tony, told me how hard they play every week. So, I mean, if they're playing hard, to me, and they're good dudes, that's probably a good culture.
So let's look forward because there's no reason to dissect the past. So I think it's always dangerous to take a small sample size and make an assessment one way or another. I think if you moving forward, like as a team, to me, this is just me, but this is what you have to find out from these coaches. Like there has to be a toughness, both mentally and physically. There has to be a discipline of how you do things, hard work, and there has to be accountability across the organization, holding everyone to the standard. Players, coaches, front office, everybody. Like this is who we are, and that kind of that will dictate kind of the type of player you bring in. And then you got to have to find the right leaders from a player standpoint, because at the end of the day, the players will set the culture. The coach has to kind of set the train tracks and like, this is who we are and this is how we're going to do things. And the coaching staff, and obviously it's head coach driven in the NFL, is really the arbitrator of that, those rules and setting the culture and who we are. But the great leaders get those players and get the right players, and this is where you have to be working really hand in hand with front office and getting those players in that are going to establish the culture in the locker room, because the players own the locker room.
Right.
That's the players. Okay. And so it's a combination, and it's set by the head coach. He's the voice. He's the one in the front of the organization. That's really the one who has to instill it and hold the line of this is who we are and this is who we're going to be. But then ultimately you got to get the right guys in the locker room, the right type of individuals, leaders that can, drive it and really be and own the locker room. Because every team that I've ever been on that had success and were good teams to be on, the culture was set by the head coach, or this is the rules and kind of how we operate. But it was the players that made sure, like, this is who we are, and this is what's acceptable, and this is how we do things. And it was players who held each other accountable. You didn't need the coaches holding us accountable as much because it was done by the locker room, and that's when you have something special, and that's what we need to build here.
Hire Ben Johnson. Let's go. All right. I could shorten this up real quick. And I agree. I don't know what kind of coach he's going to be, but that's the guy I want. So
here's all I'll say about Ben Johnson, and talking to him, and obviously the relationship I have with Mark and hearing how things go up there. This is what I know about Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson is a world-class coordinator of designing offenses and calling a game.
Yes.
World-class. And I think if you were hiring an offensive coordinator, you wouldn't even need an interview. You just say, "Hey, can come be my offensive coordinator."
Yeah.
However, it's a different job that we are hiring him for.
Yeah.
And while we can think he can be doing that, and I know people in Detroit think he'll be a great head coach. I know my good friend Mark Brunell thinks he's the world of him and thinks he's a leader and can hold a room and he sees them firsthand communicate. But at the end of the day, that's what, Ashad and Trent and whoever else is in those interviews has to sit down and evaluate, can this guy lead my organization?
This is the only question I got for Ben Johnson. Just making sure, Ben, you're still calling the plays, right?
I think that's clear. I think he's calling the plays. I mean, he has said that publicly. And I would be shocked.
Yeah.
If Ben Johnson is the head coach here, my guess is as long as he's the head coach here, he'll be calling plays.
Amen to that. Amen. All right, we got to run.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.